Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Swartwood here. I am joined tonight by who I believe is a third time guest. It
Mhm.
is the Edgar Award winning and Wall Street Journal best-selling author of 15 novels that include The River is Dark, Obscura, The Last Girl, and Or Else. He lives with his family in Minnesota. His most recent book is Never Come Back, which is the second book in his new series, which we're going to talk about. That's right. It's your favorite writer and mine, Joe Hart. Joe, how the heck are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on again. Third time, like you said. So gracious. So thank you very much. Always fun.
Absolutely. So we're going to get into the new book. Before we
Mhm.
do that, since the last time we spoke, because we last year we talked about the first book that you had in the
Mhm.
series. The
Mhm.
first book we had in the series, which is the Where They Lie, and again, the new
Mhm.
book that came out is Never Come Back. I know that you have a copy there. You just want to hold it
See?
up for people to see.
Yeah.
Ah, there it is. Yes, it's a great
Striking
cover.
cover.
Very,
Yeah.
yeah, very
Yeah.
cool looking
Thank
cover.
you.
Now, last time we spoke, you were a Edgar Award, I'm sorry, an Edgar Award nominated author. And if anybody's been paying
Hmm.
attention when I did the bio, you're now a winning author. And it was for this book, Or Else, which came out 2 years ago. Yes, it was the year
Yeah.
before. Yeah. So,
Yep.
yeah. So, kind of just kind of tell us about maybe a little recap of what Or Else is about. And
Mhm.
when you were writing it, did it ever even cross your mind that you would be nominated for an Edgar Award, let alone win it? And I should know for people who aren't aware that when it comes to awards, yeah, okay. Awards, do they really mean anything? I don't know. It's hard to say. But there
Yeah.
are in the industry some awards that are more prestigious than other awards. And the Edgar Award is right up there with being in the crime, mystery, thriller field, being one of the top most prestigious awards. So it's huge that you are now forever an Edgar Award winner. So, yeah, can you tell us a little bit about the book and, at the time, just what that whole experience was? Maybe if you remember where you were when you found out that you were, on the finalist for having, for having been a finalist for the Edgar Award.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so the book is it was a book that I had been kind of toying with for a couple years. I got a setting in my head first. It was like a nice little neighborhood where we used to live, kind of like a looped neighborhood, and I always just thought that just very picturesque next to some woods, some denser woods. I was like, this is a cool setting, and the idea just kept playing, in the back of my head that there's a story there. So the story basically surrounds a kind of a mid-level writer, like a thriller writer, and he moves back home to take care of his ailing father. His father has early onset dementia, and he kind of moves in across from his dad, across the street, and it kind of reignites an old flame with a childhood kind of crush, who's living down the street as well, who's now married with a couple kids, and she's married to one of the most prominent business people in town. And they begin an affair, and shortly thereafter, he gets kind of a note saying, "You need to stop, seeing Rachel or else." And shortly thereafter, her husband is murdered in a break-in, looks like, and her and her two boys are missing for the majority of the book. So after that, Andy, our main character, he is kind of looks like suspect number one if he were to kind of let it slip that they were seeing each other. So he is obviously very worried about his love interest and trying to find out where her and her sons went, and trying to stay out of the spotlight while doing so, and uncovers all kinds of crazy secrets and gets into all kinds of trouble throughout the entire book. So yeah, it was a really fun book to write. It was one of those that just everything kind of really seemed to flow. It came easily. The characters were there. I think we talked before about it. Like, it was one of the first books I wrote the ending before I wrote the beginning, the last like few scenes, and I think that really helped kind of solidify where I wanted to go with it and stuff. So it was really fun. It was an exciting thing to write. I don't think I ever had in my head that it would ever be nominated for any awards or anything like that. It just felt like a really readable book. It was like funny to say, but it just felt like one of those books you could sit down and just crack open, and it was kind of addictive, and propulsive and compelling. So I felt really good about how it turned out. Of course, that's like no indication of how it's going to sell or if people are really going to like it or anything like that. But yeah, it was. I was happy with the reception, and then yeah, I think it was January is almost always when they put out the Edgar Award notifications if you've been nominated. I think it's right around Poe's birthday is usually when they try to do it. So yeah, I just opened up Twitter one day and here was like a bunch of notifications, which is uncommon for me to open it up and have like 12, 14 people talking to me at once and stuff. So yeah, so I found out I was nominated that way and they'd put out the list and yeah, it was just really, it was like kind of crazy to see all the other authors alongside my book and um, yeah, it was just one of those really fun things to look forward to then because then the awards weren't till April, I think, end of April. So it was like a few months there where it was just kind of um, it was fun. We got to do like some panels for our, like the paperback original, which is my category, and I got to talk with some other great authors and do things like that. And there was always little things they had us do, readings from the book and post videos and stuff. So it was a fun process being nominated in itself, and and an honor, like you said, because it is a fairly prestigious award in the genre. So I was bowled over to be nominated, and then yeah, lo and behold, won in my category. So it was kind of wild tuning in. We weren't able to go to the actual awards banquet, but we live streamed it and we're watching when my name got called for the category and stuff. So it was kind of wild. It was like surreal that it actually happened. I actually looked at my wife and I'm like, that just happened? That really? Did I just so yeah, so it was really fun. It was a really fun experience. It's been it still kind of blows me away a little bit that it actually happened. So yeah, really good.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's great. Congratulations. And if anybody goes
Yeah.
to Joe's website, he actually, I think it's still on the front page or it's easy to find where you can see the video. They actually, because again, you mentioned it was live streamed. I believe they actually have it on YouTube. So you can see when they read the finalists and then when they announce yours. And I believe it was not your editor, but I think it was it Gracie Doyle? The head
Yeah,
of
Gracie.
Thompson Mercer, she comes up, she reads your acceptance speech and, accepts it on your behalf. So that was really cool. In our chat, we actually have Lauren says, or else was one of the first books when she started, being a bookstagrammer. She never put two and two together. When she started the Nora McTavish novels, I guess that you were the same author, but she loved or else. So that was really cool to hear.
Oh, nice.
So again, this is, I mean, well, this is an arc, but this is the cover. For people who have not read it yet, obviously it's on Amazon. So go check it out. But after Or Else, you then had your very first Nora McTavish novel. That was Where They Lie. And obviously, we're here to talk about the second book. But before we talk about the second book, can we kind of maybe get a little recap of the first book? Just maybe about the character, where that whole thing came about, and then how that gets us into book two.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Nora McTavish, the first book, it's funny, it's very much about her. It's there is a plot going on with she's a child protective service agent in the first book, and it's very much centered around who she is, her backstory, where she came from, and kind of who she is as far as why she's so driven in her career. And I just found like a child protective services worker as a really compelling character. It's something different. I hadn't seen that before in fiction, but I thought it was really interesting to kind of explore that side of kind of the system, kind of a social wellness system and whatnot, and just the pitfalls and the problems that can arise in a system with such vulnerable people. You got kids that are being removed from their households, and the drama and the trauma and the problems that arise from all those situations. So there was a lot to work with there as far as kind of setting up a problematic plot or a mystery and stuff like that. So basically, in the first book, she had been working with a family who had some issues with their foster children, they were they had a few foster children in their family. They were one of the first, like youngest foster families in the state, and they were also kind of influencers online and whatnot. And then the everyone except the mother of the family died in a plane crash. And so after this happens, Nora feels like she may have missed something, and that kind of spins the mystery off into kind of the rest of the book. She tries to figure out exactly what happened and why this happened, and crosses kind of the wrong people in the midst of that and whatnot. So coming from that really kind of broken, tough background that she has, it really put a different light on how she approached the situations and whatnot, which was it was fun to write about and interesting to me. Which it definitely carries over into the rest of the series because she's got a very long arc, not just across one book, but across several. So it made the next book easy to figure out kind of where to go from there with her backstory already set up in the first. So yeah.
Yeah. So when you wrote this book, did you have the idea that this was going to be a series, or at least there was going to be a second book, or did you initially write this as a standalone, and then as you were maybe nearing the finish line, you realized, oh, okay, I could still do more with this character?
Yeah, I always try to write a book with enough closure where it's if there's enough interest or things happen in publishing and whatnot that it can just very much stand on its own. I try not to leave too many loose strings, kind of hanging at the end of the books. So I had more in my mind. I had, a couple books in mind, and I hoped that I would get to write them because she was a very interesting character. But I tied the first one off well enough where it can definitely stand on its own. But there was enough movement and room and freedom, like I said, with her character to work with and whatnot. So yeah, that's kind of where it led for the second book and whatnot. Yeah.
And so, or else was written in first person. This one is also
Mhm.
written in first person. Obviously, you've written novels that some are in first person, third person. Uh,
Mhm.
I don't know. Sometimes it's weird for certain authors when they're writing in a first person that's not their same gender. So obviously, or
Yeah, yeah,
else you had the main character who was a male writer. You know, you were a male
yeah.
writer. Oftentimes, writers seem to do that. They usually write about protagonists who are also writers because write what you know. But
Right.
in this instance, you were doing the Nora books. What, instead of, you could have, I mean, the first like the opening is written in third person because it's from a completely different point of view. But what really kind of drew you to the idea that, okay, you weren't going to just write this in a third person point of
Mhm.
view of her character, but instead you were going to do the first person? Did you
Yeah.
maybe play around with the idea of doing it in third person, or did you know from the beginning that, okay, this was going to be first person?
Yeah, I kind of knew from the beginning. And I think because of who the character was, since it's such a character-driven novel and series, I knew I had to get really kind of deep inside that character's head and whatnot. And it felt like first person was kind of the best way to access all of the feelings and thoughts and just really go deep with it. I think you can do that with third person. I think at times it's a little more difficult. I guess it's each project you come across is um, sometimes it depends on the plot too. Sometimes I think so. Given kind of the delicate nature of the plot and how traumatized this person was, I felt like there was more to telling it from her point of view than it would be kind of set back a little bit. So yeah, it just felt right. So and as far as the gender, I've had a couple people comment on that, and so far it's been really good, supportive comments that which is nice to hear because you do always like worry a little bit about coming at it from a different gender point of view. And of course, I was just trying to write people and just characters, and that always seems to work well. Is just who they are and whatnot. So yeah, it's been good. She's a compelling character. It's been fun to write.
Plus, you also have the benefit that your editor and your agent are also women. That
Yeah,
typically happens with me too, where sometimes my agent, especially, will come back and say, "Yeah, this line right here, this
right.
character would not say this, or they wouldn't use this
Yeah,
word to just go to this thing." And I'm like, "Okay,
yes,
no problem.
yeah,
That's
yes,
that is
absolutely.
okay."
Yep. Having people being able to comment and kind of steer you right is invaluable. So yes, you're right. Yeah, my agent, my editor, yes, my wife, all of them, yeah, keep me on track. So for sure.
So at what point with the first book, Where They Lie, did you start having the idea of book two? Or was it one of those things where you were already done with the book, it was in the can, and it was time to write a book two, and you just had to come up with an idea then? Or I mean, how I guess how far ahead with this character did you see maybe books lined out? And is this a book where you have to read book one before you read book two, or is it more of a,
Mm,
I guess we'll just say like a Jack Reacher type thing where you can just kind of come in, in book 19, and it doesn't really matter if you haven't read the first 18 books?
right. Yeah, I kind of started getting the inklings of the idea for the second book. It was closing in on like finishing, like editing, and the first book was done, and basically starting to go out the door. And I started thinking like, okay, well, if I am going to write a second book, what's it going to be? And that's kind of when the idea started. Um, and yeah, it came pretty quickly. It came pretty easily. Like the other supporting characters were kind of there right away, and the scenarios and stuff. So it came in. I think it wasn't too long after this first book was written, that the second book, like I had a pretty solid outline and whatnot. So, and as far as standing on its own, yeah, it's the same thing. Like I feel like if somebody picks up book two and hasn't read book one, I want them to be able to enjoy it without being lost about who the character is or what they're referencing or anything like that. So I just did, I just kind of brushed up against really briefly, with Nora's background, so people would get a kind of a feeling about where she was coming from and whatnot. And just a kind of a slight quick reference to the first book and whatnot and how that wrapped up. But otherwise, this book is very much a standalone. You can read it. You're not going to be lost with who the person is. And I feel like I feel good about how strongly Nora's character comes across, and that probably helps the whole feeling that it is very much a standalone. Because yeah, you can pick it up and kind of just hit the ground running with her and whatnot. So yeah.
So I know we had discussed this probably back the first time we had done an interview. Just the overall writing process for you. If I remember correctly, and I'm completely blanking right now, so I don't remember at all. But you
Yep.
don't really outline, right?
I do a little of both, like loosely. So I like loosely outline, but I do really like leaving enough room to have that kind of that discovery as you're writing along. So I need a little bit of framework to kind of get a general sense of where I'm going. But yeah, I like the characters being able to move and change, as the story's being told. And I know this, like, some of the best parts of writing is when there's that surprising moment when points connect and characters, you make that it's almost like they not so much take on a life of their own, but they what they're going to say when you get to the moment, and that really feels like it's kind of that wellspring from inside. If you know the character well enough, they say what they should say, they do what they should do, and sometimes they do surprise you. So it feels like some of that discovery is there if you don't tighten it down too much as far as the outlining process and whatnot. So I do a little of both. I dabble. Yeah.
So how about for book one or book two, were there certain things where you had the outline and you got surprised, where maybe a character said or did something that you weren't expecting, and then you started going off the outline?
Mhm.
Do you remember a moment where that happened? Or if not with these books, maybe with Or Else or any other type of book,
Yeah.
where you had that experience?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, in probably a good example in this book, was the kind of one of the supporting characters, Kendra, and how she's the daughter of the friend of Nora, who's she's trying to help in the custody battle. And I approached the situation with Nora and Kendra where they're both a little leery of each other, and not really knowing what to expect from the other. And it was really fun having Kendra's character kind of come out and develop, and really realizing the things that the kid was going through at the time would definitely shape, her responses and how she was reacting to her mother and to her father and things like that. So a couple parts when she said some surprising, funny things, especially to Nora. It was great. It was great to see her that she kind of had this sense of humor, and she was pretty resilient and tough too. And there's a couple points in the book where uh, she just kind of shows how tough kids can be in certain situations, how resilient they are. Um, and that was fun to see. So those moments when the character kind of comes out and surprises you with something like that, like a sense of humor or something. That's great. It's fun.
So with the editing process for these books, how much rewriting do you end up doing when you kind of go through the developmental editing process? Are there times where when you turn in what you feel is the finished manuscript and you realize, oh, part three or like act three, we have to completely redo?
Hmm.
Or have you gotten lucky in the fact that mostly what is there in the draft that you turn in is really kind of there with what comes out?
Yeah. I have a pretty good system prior to even handing in the book where I do a ton of that kind of restructuring and rewriting ahead of the game. So when I finish a draft, I'll run through it and change a few things just on my own read through of a second or third time. And then my agent reads through and she'll give me her notes. And that's where some significant changes go. And I have a couple of beta readers that give me some hints and tips and stuff like that. So by the time my editor gets it, and then by the time the dev editor gets it, um, it's changed considerably from the very first draft and whatnot. And usually it's not. Usually I do get pretty lucky by the time the developmental editor is working on it. There's typically no major changes. There's little things. It's tightening scenes, a little bit of dialogue type things, rearranging some scenes sometimes. My last dev editor was really helpful in that um, for Never Come Back, uh, taking a scene and being like, he was like, this hits much harder if we move it to the next chapter or the chapter after that. And it's like it's wonderful to have those fresh eyes on it where you'd be like, okay, why didn't I see that? Yeah, that does work a whole lot better there. So yeah, so I've been fortunate where I haven't had to do too many rewrites. I've had a couple other novels that have been really, really extensive rewrites. And that's kind of a painful, long, drawn out process. Um, but yeah, I've been lucky with the last couple that I've written. They haven't had those major major rewrites. So yeah.
So with these two books, when you sit down to write them, what type of writing routine do you have you gotten into? Are you trying to do a chapter a day, so
Mhm.
many thousand words a day? And have there been times where I don't know about you, but there have been times where usually I kind of get stuck. I don't want to say necessarily stuck, and I never really believe in writer's block, but there are times where I just kind of don't. I'm like, you know what, today maybe isn't a good day, and that what's funny about that is that then like later that night I realize, oh wait, no, that's not the direction I want to go. And
Mhm.
it's almost like I save my time. I save myself that those wasted words because I didn't sit down. Because then maybe I just in my head I just was like, you know what, I don't think I'm comfortable yet. Like I'm not really sure where the story is going, and I need an extra day or two to really kind of get there. Do you ever? I don't know. Like how's that process been? And when you wrote your very first novel, how much
Mhm.
how much difference? I mean, what like, can you tell how much you've grown as a writer in certain aspects? Is there certain things that you've just like you wish you would have known when you started out, over a decade ago writing novels that you feel that you've really grown as a writer to nowadays?
Yeah. Yeah. So process wise, yeah. I mean, it depends on the day. Our our life is a little volatile. My son is autistic, so we never know exactly how the day is going to go. So I usually squeeze in my writing, typically in the morning, hopefully in the morning. Sometimes it doesn't work out, so then it'll be in the afternoon and whatnot. And I'll try to just get as much down as feels kind of right for the day, because there are certain days, and I know you know this, like you mentioned, there's certain days where the words come and they're great, and you'll knock out 14, 16, 1800 words, no problem. And they feel right. And then there'll be other days where it's just like eking out 100 or 200 words is all you can do. And I guess that ties in a little bit to what I've learned over the years is that's okay. It's doesn't have to be every day doesn't need to be just an enormous output for words. I feel like I put a lot of pressure on myself in the past to make sure that I got 1,500 or 2,000 words a day, something like that, to keep up the momentum. And if it's working, great. But I feel like there are days and there's circumstances and there's stories and different things that you that maybe don't come that easy. And there's days that where you may need to spend a day or two thinking about one scene to get it right. I just did that actually on the book that I'm writing now. I wrote the scene and I was like, that's not done. And I came back the next day and I added a little bit. And I'm like, that's not done. And the next day, that's not done. So I spent about 4 days tweaking it, taking a little away, adding some. And finally, the other day, I was writing and I added a paragraph and a little bit of dialogue. And I thought, there it is. So I just, you kind of stumble on the end sometimes when you're least expecting it. But that's probably what I've a good thing that I've learned over the years is just um, you can shoot for an output, but there's just going to be days that you're not going to hit it, and that's okay. And the days that you don't hit the big output, sometimes those days, even if you only get a couple hundred words, sometimes those words are really good. Sometimes they can, I always try to walk away from the day of writing being happy with something that I've written. So if it's 100 words, even if it's just one line in there, if I'm really pleased with that, that's what I take away from the day is that, that there's some quality there. I feel good about what I wrote. If you write 2,000 or 3,000 words in a day, you even feel good that you wrote that many. But yeah, I found that sometimes it's nice to just pick out little pieces that you're really proud of or happy with and take that with you. And I think I don't know who said it or if it's just a general quote or something that, so much writing gets done when you're not at the keyboard. You walk away from it and you play these scenes in your head, or you go for a walk and you're talking to yourself about dialogue or characters or something, and these scenes or the, like you said, like there's a hiccup or a little bit of a block, and it'll get resolved when you're absolutely nowhere near the computer. I found that really helps is just kind of talking it out with my wife or just thinking about it away from my writing time. And sometimes those, the knots will just kind of come undone while you're not sitting trying to pick them loose. And so that's what I would tell my younger self too, is just, don't, not so much pressure, you don't have to be sitting in front of the keyboard to write. You can walk around and be in your own head and be writing at the same time. So yeah.
And so you've written all different types of genres, obviously, mystery, thriller, science fiction, horror. If you had to pick one genre, what genre would that be and why? It sounds like a very generic high school question, but
No,
like, what type of,
no.
I mean, if you had to pick one, because, you're all over the place. And I
Yeah.
imagine that's also difficult, in terms of a marketing standpoint,
Hmm.
which is oftentimes why writers do pen names for different genres. But then again, you have
Yeah.
other writers who do dabble in all different types of genres, and they still manage to make it work and successful. But still, I mean, if you had to just stick with just one genre, yeah, I'm just curious, which one would that be?
It's a great question, actually. It's not generic at all. It's a really good question. Uh I think I'd have to go with horror because horror is so multifaceted that you can actually encompass lots of other genres within the horror genre. I feel like you can have mystery wrapped up in what you're writing about horror. You can have romance. You can have the thrills and the scares and all of the things I think people are looking for in a novel in horror. So I think that's what I would probably it's what I cut my teeth on. It's what I started with and fell in love with to begin with. So I think that's what I would kind of rely on. that said, I've been away from the horror genre for a while. I always have a little horror tinge to my books, no matter what. There's always certain scenes where it is kind of pretty scary or harrowing. Um, but I think I think horror is kind of where, if somebody put a gun to my head, I'd that's where I would write from now on, because it's an interesting base to kind of spread out from, I think. So yeah, yeah.
Well, so okay, so what's next then? We have book two.
Mhm.
Um, show the cover again for everybody
Yeah.
so that they can see. It's a great cover. There it is. Never come back. So again, we have book two. And I know
Mhm.
that we've kind of been all over the place, and I've been blanking. And you and I were talking earlier, there's a lot, I got a lot of other stuff kind of going on. So
Mhm.
did we really
Yeah.
talk about what book two is about?
Not so much like the actual
Okay,
like
yeah,
dig
let's talk
into like
about
what
then
it
book
is.
two. Because I'm like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, did we talk about this? And I don't want to, and
Yeah.
then if we didn't, I don't want to skip it because I know we talked a lot about book one and how it ties into book two. But all right, yeah. So
Yeah.
let's okay, let's talk about book two. Kind of get you
Yeah.
tell us about book two, and where Nora finds herself this time.
Yeah. So book two, Nora has spoiler alert, she has left Child Protective Services. So she has started her own child like kind of family advocacy company. And she it's kind of a dual plot line a little bit. So she takes on a case for a couple who are they are intellectually disabled and who have lost the custody of their daughter, actually to the mother's grandmother has taken custody of her. So Nora kind of steps in and tries to help them get their daughter back. And at the same time, she gets a call from a childhood friend that she hasn't heard from in almost 20 years, who is also going through kind of a child custody battle. And her husband has been accused of murder, but has kind of gotten off on a technicality. So he was arrested, accused of murder. Before he could go to trial, there was some tainted evidence that came to light, and so he was released on that. And her friend is definitely afraid of letting him have custody, and he's trying to get custody of their daughter, and their daughter is caught in the middle, and she is kind of torn because her obviously her father's been accused of this terrible crime, and her mom fully believes that her father is guilty. So Nora kind of steps in the middle of this, and amidst that are all these feelings, because this is a friend who was kind of around the time that all of the terrible things happened in Nora's life. There, she was in that time period and associated with Nora's mother. Nora's mother disappeared right before her life kind of fell apart. So the friend is basically saying, please come help me. And by the way, I think I might know where your mom is. She disappeared almost 20 years ago. I think I might have a clue about where she went. And this is the major arc for Nora's character across the book, is deciding whether or not she actually even wants to know what happened to her mother, or try to gain contact with her again, because there's all these unresolved feelings about the traumatic past that she went through and whatnot. And so it's very much like a parallel type thing with her, and like I said, the daughter Kendra, the character there. She can very much relate to her going through these things where her parents and her whole life is in tumult, and so it's just a fun ride to follow Nora kind of going through the clues and trying to figure out what actually happened in this kind of murder case to some extent, and kind of what the current threat is, because there is somebody kind of in the shadows in the background that is a threat throughout the book. So she's trying to uncover that at the same time, and kind of juggling this dual plot line between the two families and whatnot. So yeah, it's really fun to write.
So we probably talked about this at the last time we did the interview about the first novel.
Mhm.
But again, just to recap, uh, how much completely blanking now. Since that's just not been good. How
Like,
much, how much research did you have to put into just like child protective services in general? Was it more just
yeah,
like online research? Did you have somebody you spoke with to kind of get the ins and outs? Because obviously, when you're dealing with, there's not that many books, at least that I'm aware of, that deal with like CPS in this way
Hmm.
from a point of view of the inside mechanics of how it works. So I know that to do
Yeah.
that, you want to make sure you know what you're talking about. So what
Yeah.
type of research kind of went into that?
Yeah, so like you said, there's quite a bit of reading online that I did about certain cases and kind of what power the CPS has and what they can and can't do, that type of thing, and what is asked of certain investigators. And that's who Nora was she was a more of a forensic interviewer or an investigator for CPS. So she's trained in knowing what questions to ask and how to conduct an interview and an investigation to see if there's abuse going on in a household, what signs to look for, and then what steps to go through for the children's best interest. So it was very interesting, like reading a lot about that just in general. I did tap into a former assistant district attorney who was a friend in kind of locally here, and she was super helpful because, of course, she had gone through a ton of these cases during her time, working, under the DA and stuff. So she was really instrumental in kind of getting the ins and outs, especially like firsthand cases. She was able to tell me, you know, she's like, well, here was this case and this was the scenario, and could kind of lay out the different things that happened, and I was able to actually kind of take different pieces of these real life cases and kind of shift them and mold them into the book and whatnot. So um, I guess I enjoy kind of both sides of that type of research. It's really fun to kind of do the very solitary, like sitting, reading, kind of digging into the different things that you're going to have to tap into, but then also finding an expert or somebody who deals with it in day to day and just having a conversation with them is really, really helpful. I did that for Obscura too. I got in touch with uh, somebody who was quite a ways up in NASA that was willing to answer my questions and go back and forth and actually read a draft of the book and go through and be like, okay, this would definitely happen, that definitely would not happen, or you're being very conservative on these estimates, and this is where we put this type of pollution or whatever else that he was talking about. So yeah, I would suggest, like, anybody, like especially like doing research, that's what I would suggest is doing the kind of the behind the scenes type aspect with somebody who really knows what they're talking about. And most people are extremely happy to talk about their professions and what they do every day. It's almost like a break, I think, to them, and having somebody be interested in their day to day is they kind of appreciate it. So happy to be like noted in the back of the book and thanked and stuff like that. But yeah, it was good. It was good. The research portion of it was very interesting and you know disturbing too at the same time, because here you're getting an inside view of some pretty terrible cases and problematic situations. So yeah, it was it was something. It was an experience.
So we have book two that just recently came out
Mhm.
last week, right? The second book just came out last week.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, yeah. Last Tuesday. Yep.
So from based on what you're saying, it sounds like there's more to Nora's story. So is there a third book in the future? And if there is, I don't want you to have to, give out too much, but is there any little sneak preview you can give about what's next for Nora?
Hmm. Yes. So I am currently writing book three in the Nora series. So I don't know about a timeline as far as like a release date or anything like that yet, but I'm well into it. Um, yeah, little sneak preview. I guess I think it's pretty safe to say, because the end of the book, book two, kind of sets up book three very well. Is the promise of Nora finding potentially where her mother went, or a clue to where her mother went, is finally delivered. She finally decides to accept that information and at least sit with it and just kind of see how she feels. And yeah, there's a little lead off that, and kind of a like a hint that she probably will track her mother down. So that's a little bit of kind of the territory that we're running into in book three, is kind of these closing out these very old wounds and seeing if there is if somebody can have closure that's gone through kind of the terrible things that she's gone through, and if you can forgive the people that are partially responsible, that type of thing. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with that.
Yeah, very cool. So I know we talked about how you do have a copy of the book there, and I think we did
Mhm.
say, I'm not sure if we said at the beginning of the recording that we are looking to give away a copy. Joe is looking to give away a signed copy, so I don't know if anybody who's watching currently is interested. If so, just shout it out in the chat. I guess we'll do first person who shouts it out can gets a free copy from Joe. This is kind
Perfect.
of again an experimental thing we're doing with the giveaways. If successful, we'll maybe do some more in the future. But it's more of an experiment. So
Yeah.
in the meantime, oh, it looks like Lauren wants a copy, a signed copy. So
Okay.
Lauren, is
All right.
yours.
Perfect.
How do I want to do this? Email Joe, I guess
Yeah.
yeah, email Joe. Either message him on Facebook, his Facebook page, which is what, Facebook .com
Joe Hart,
slash
author. Yeah. Joe
Joe
Hart,
Hart
author.
author.
Hmm.
Message him or shoot him an email, and he will get
Yeah.
a signed copy in the mail. Well, that was easy. Um, So what are you like? I don't know. Are you reading anything right now that you're enjoying?
Mm.
Or watching anything you're watching? Any good
Hmm.
recommendations?
Yeah. Yeah. I read, it's funny, I'm kind of ashamed to say that I hadn't read Annie Proulx up until late last year. So she wrote probably her most famous is Brokeback Mountain. She wrote the short story that the movie is based on, and I had never read her work, and somebody suggested it to me last fall. So I'm kind of on an Annie Proulx kick. So I read one of her collections, and I just finished recently The Shipping News, which I thought was fantastic. It's really, really great. Very sprawling and just, took its time with the narrative. And yeah, it was great. So yeah, finished that. And then, yeah, I'm currently reading a collection of novellas by Jim Harrison. So that's the one with Legends of the Fall and Revenge and stuff like that. So just some, a little more classics that I missed and just hadn't read. So catching up on those, which has been great. So yeah, yeah. How about you?
What have I been reading? I don't know. Typically, I try to read a lot of different things at the same time. I one of the short story collections I'm reading is oh, I don't know about you. Like when I read hardcovers, I always take off the jacket. I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know why I don't want the jacket to get messed up. And so I always take off
yeah.
the jacket. But one of the short story collections is Roman Stories by, and
Oh,
I can
okay.
never pronounce her name. Oops, it's upside down. Roman Stories.
There you go. Okay.
Can
Yep.
never pronounce the name, but she had written the namesake that had been turned into a movie. And yeah, it's really good. It's just it's interesting. She's been living in Italy, and she learned and she like knows Italian. So she writes these stories in Italian, and then not all of them, but she then translates them into English herself. And I think a few of the other stories are
Really?
actually translated by somebody else. But it's always interesting when you're like when you translate your own work, are you doing it word for word, or are
Yeah.
you almost as the author kind of also revising a little bit when you translate? I'm just kind of curious like how that process would work. If I ever get her on to talk to her, I have to ask just how an author translates their own work from one language into a next. It's very
Yeah.
curious.
That's interesting because I think, yeah, the temptation would be there if you're coming along and you see a way to either, yeah, tweak it or make it better or something to change things. It would be tempting to do that. So yeah, that's
Well,
interesting.
even
Yeah.
like your first job, do you do everything on computer? Or because I know like when
Yes.
I talked to Jason Rikulik the other day, he says he does his first drafts longhand. And so
Wow.
I'm like, okay,
Okay.
well, so then when you're, you know, putting them in the computer, that almost, I guess, in a way becomes your second draft because you're not doing that word for word. You might be changing things here and there. So but
Yeah.
you do your first drafts then just on the computer and then go from there.
I do, and I've seen a few authors talk about writing things in longhand to begin with, and that just, oh my God, that feels like such a chore. I mean, I think there potentially is some benefits there, like you say, like writing it out and then kind of retyping it. There may be some kind of refinement there, but yeah, no, I always do the first draft, digitally and kind of go from there and whatnot. I did actually, funny, like my little gadget here, I did buy one of these tablets, the Remarkable. So I have been using that for like outlining and sketching down ideas and things like that. And I feel like there is something a little like tactile sense, like sitting down with the pen and the tablet and like putting the two together and kind of writing and jotting down notes that is helpful. So that's been kind of a fun little tool that I've been using for the last 6, 8 months. In just grab it and leave it wherever you're writing and jot down notes and stuff. So that's something I've been using some too. So yeah.
I don't know if we ever discussed this. I know we talk all the time about other stuff.
Mhm.
But it's one of those things that I've always have wanted to try, but I've never done it myself. Where I think it was Chuck Wendig had suggested it with a first draft, essentially just doing a screenplay
Mm,
where you were because most of that is mostly just dialogue heavy with the characters and a
yeah,
few scene directions, but
yeah,
essentially just you do the outline of the story as a script.
yeah,
And then you take that and then just really flesh it out into the short story, the novel, the novella, whatever it is that you're writing. And then on top of that, you also have a first draft of a potential screenplay as well. It's always something that I
right.
always thought was very kind of interesting. I don't know. As I also feel like it's also extra work where I could just also just do my first draft the traditional way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny. Like I've written several screenplays and stuff and scripts, and a lot of it is just some of it's actually for a purpose, and some of it is for the like the exercise to do it, like visualization and like you say, kind of getting the just the dialogue and action down. I actually, it was funny for Where They Lie. I wrote I wrote that as a screenplay first and just very fast and kind of knock that out. And it's a short book anyways, but I think that may have it added to the kind of brevity of the book is writing it in screenplay format to begin with. Um, but yeah, it's an exercise for sure. I think it's useful. It definitely takes a different set of tools in the brain and stuff. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because a script typically was 100 and should be about 100, no more than 150 pages to do like a regular 2 hour movie. So oftentimes it
Yeah.
is the brevity. You have to really look at the scene choice. Where I think
Hmm.
sometimes when you're writing a book, you don't really have to deal with that. I know a writer friend of mine talked about when they're working on a script right now for, I think he's working on a script, and the director he's working with will come back with certain scenes and basically say we can't do this scene because
Hmm.
it's gonna to shoot this we're gonna have to shut down 5 blocks, and it's like all
Yeah.
these extra things where the directors and producers will be coming at the story from a completely different angle than what the writer does, because the writer, I mean,
Yeah.
when we're just writing a novel,
Yeah.
it's unlimited. We can do whatever we
Yeah.
want. We can shut down the entire New York City, or we can do
Hmm.
whatever we want, as opposed to when you're actually shooting a movie, they have to take into consideration um, how many
Actual
extras are going to
logistics.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
logistics of just the actual setting, like how's the weather going to be if we
Yeah.
shooting this, how much time is the sun
Yeah.
going to be out. And so it's just kind of
Yeah.
interesting kind of coming it through it from that aspect, as well as also just the scene choices, where there are times where I know I've been guilty of this in the past. I'm trying to be a little bit better where I might have more characters than are needed. I remember with one of my
Mm.
Avery Bishop novels, my editor at the time, there was an extra character in the scene, and my editor was like, I don't think you need these two characters. He's just one character. And so basically the one character got absorbed in the other character, and she was right.
Yeah.
It was the chapter lost nothing from losing that other character. And so it's always
Yeah.
a good kind of thing as a writer to be aware of, where if you get rid of this one, I mean, like, how important is this character? If you get rid of this character from this chapter, this or even this book, is the book going to suffer? Is the chapter going to suffer? So it's always kind of an interesting thing to I think about. But
Right.
we're coming up almost about on an hour now. So Joe, I don't want to
Mhm.
keep much more of your time. But before we do go, where can people find you online?
Uh, Not on Twitter so much anymore, or X, whatever they call it now, but I am there. I check in, and Instagram. You can find me over there. I'm on there quite a bit. Otherwise, at my website, it's joehartbooks.com. If anybody sends me a message through there, it gets to me. So yeah, any of those places.
Awesome. And again, Lauren, if you have not done so yet, make sure again you do message Joe, either again, I guess on his website or on Facebook, and he will get a copy out, a signed copy of his most recent book. Joe, again, once again, pull up the hold up the book so everyone can see it. Again, it is Never Come Back, the second Nora McTavish thriller
Mhm.
that has just came out. So check it out. Ebook, paperback, audiobook, all the good places. So, anything else you want to plug before we wrap up here?
No, I don't think so. It's always fun to come on and chat books and writing and everything. So yeah, thanks so much for having
Yeah,
me on
I
again.
know. And it's always weird too, because you and I just talk all the time about other
Yeah,
stuff. So it's like trying
yeah.
to wait, hold on. We do have a question here from Bella. She does
Oh,
ask, will there be more in the Nora series?
yeah, yeah.
Yes, Nora, if you I don't know if you when you got on here, but Joe was talking about a third book that he is working on a third book. So if you do go back a little bit, he talks a little bit more about that. We don't want to give too much about away about what the third book's going to be about, but he did give a little bit of a sneak preview of a third book. How much more could you do with this character, though? Do you feel like this is something that you could keep going, or do you feel that you don't want to, you know, kind of do too much with the character where so sometimes
Yeah.
that happens where sometimes
Yes.
you will get into some of these I don't know how some of these authors do it where they're like 20, 30 books into. I mean, I love Nora Roberts and like
Hmm.
her her JD Robb series, but
Hmm.
what, like 50 books, and I've read some of those books. They're very enjoyable, but at some point it's like, man, how much more can you do with these characters?
Yeah, that's a talent. I always feel like for my speed, it's always like maybe three books, maybe four. Um, I don't want to go out on a limb and say that there's going to be a fourth Nora book. I generally I feel like Nora's arc will probably be three books. But yeah, it's hard to tell sometimes. But yeah, I'm the same way. Like as far as I don't think I could stick around for 8, 10, 20, 30 books with the same characters. It just feels like yeah, I would need to move on. And yeah, that it would be I don't want to say torture, but it would be an exercise to continue to write past like a 20 book series. It's a talent to be able to do that and make it compelling each time. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, the new book, Never Come Back. Also, at the beginning of this, we did talk about, of course, Or Else, which
Hmm.
won the prestigious Edgar Award. So, if you've not read Or Else, definitely check that. Read all of Joe's books. Go back from the very beginning. What was your very first novel?
My first published was the collection of short stories. So it was Midnight Paths. But my first novel was Lineage. So that was my first kind of supernatural horror novel and stuff. That's where we started out. So yeah.
Awesome. And so, obviously, all that stuff is on Amazon.
Mhm.
So yeah, so Joe, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for everybody who tuned in to watch live and ask questions, Lauren, Bella. And yeah, again, check out Joe online on social media, on keep an eye out. Hopefully, book three will be coming out,
Yeah.
will be coming down sometime soon. So again, thanks Joe for hanging out, and we'll see everybody next time. Bye.
Thanks.